Hey guys, Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and today we have the Benchmade Boost. This is a new knife for 2017. Comes in similar colors and design to the Benchmade Freak, and I will try to do some comparison between these two as we go through this. I will say probably more comparable to the Benchmade Barrage. You know, if the Freak is a slight alteration on the Griptilian, then the Boost would be, kind of a slight alteration on the Barrage. And I think a step up from the Barrage. I like the ergos better. I like the grippiness better. I definitely like the blade shape much better. And of course, the assist is still very strong and perhaps a little smoother. And I'll speak to that when we get to action. So all of those things made this knife pretty appealing to me. I knew that Benchmade did a good job with their assist. I've had a Barrage myself and I've handled a few others. So all of that kind of came together to make me really curious about this knife. And so I've been really, really happy checking it out. And I have to say that overall, I'm going to be fairly positive about this knife with some qualifications as usual. Size and weight, guys, 8.5 inches overall. The blade is just a little over 3 5/8, and the handle is just a little over 4 3/4. Now, one dimension that's worth noticing that I will complain about just a little is the width on here is almost 3/4 of an inch. Okay, it's not quite there, but it's definitely over 5/8. So a little bit of girth happening on that handle. Does make it very comfortable, but makes it just a little thick in pocket. Weight on this guy is 4.57 ounces. Okay, so that's sort of the size and weight. And in terms of a carry knife, and using this for EDC, which I have quite a bit because I actually really like it. I especially like that blade shape, as I said. I haven't noticed it being a problem, all right? So yes, it's a little thicker than I'd like to see, and that's one of the things that'll come up, and I'll talk about that when we get to the handle. Again, just like the Freak, I'm gonna be, saying that this would be like, I would be just singing the praises of this knife to the mountaintops if this was G10 over stainless steel liners, okay, instead of the GRN or whatever reinforced plastic whatever they're calling their reinforced plastic, okay? I think both of these knives, and if anyone from Benchmade is watching this, please make this out of G10. Now, what you better not do is charge more for it, because G10 is not more expensive, okay? Consider the price of this knife with the kind of construction I'm suggesting, right? And so, now let's move on from that. That's my biggest complaint about both of those knives. And so, other than that, I really do think they're well done. Okay, start with the blade. This is S30V drop point blade with this nice swedge on the top. Typical Benchmade finish, although I think there's a little difference here. Now, somebody here, I asked this about the Freak, no one mentioned it. Maybe no one else sees this, but I kind of think they're using a slightly heavier grinder on, or a slightly heavier belt on the flats versus the bevels. It just seems like a finer grind lines down here compared to up here. Maybe I'm just imagining it. And of course it does have that light Benchmade stonewash that we're used to seeing. Now, while we're talking about this blade, I want to point out very even grind on this guy, which again, I hate to have to say this, but for Benchmade, that's something you have to point out, and they have done a good job on this, but I know that they don't always get that right. And I can't speak, of course, to every boost. I can only speak to this one. So I do think, they've done a great job getting it decently thin behind the edge and doing a nice even grind. Very impressive on that part of this. Now, I definitely like this blade shape a lot more than the Barrage. The Barrage sort of was a more gentle belly, something like this, and it was more spear point. This is, more of a traditional drop point, and this this belly up here, I think, makes this a little nicer for EDC tasks. Also, the edge geometry is much better than the Barrage. So this blade, guys, an S30V, which, although not a super steel, is definitely a high performance steel. So and in many ways, I like S30V a little better than S35V. And yes, it's a little harder to sharpen, but in my experience, it also holds that edge a little bit better as well. And of course, all of that is subject to heat treat. So that's a little subjective there, okay? So blade, I think, guys, is a total win. I really, really like this blade. Notice again, and I've often pointed this out, this has enough flat portion here that I can get my thumb up there. So when if you're a knife maker watching this, or if you're a production company watching this, this is really, really appreciated. So don't take this swedge all the way back to the handle. It's really nice to have that little bit of extra real estate for my thumb. So that's the blade, total win on the blade. And that's one of the things, by the way, that really drew me to this knife. I find this to be a very, very attractive blade shape. Now, let's talk about the action. Of course, this is an assisted opening knife, so it's not, you're not worried about it at all in terms of, the detent and how it flicks out and stuff, because you just kind of suggest that this knife come out and it quickly does so. What I will say is this, it does feel really smooth and it's very comfortable to actuate. And this is, one of the assisted knives that I do actually like to play with. And you can see I can actuate it with one hand, although it does take a little bit of practice. The other thing I always find myself doing with assisted knives is doing sort of a modified Spidey flick, where I just kind of push with my middle finger there to get the knife to deploy. So yeah, action, of course, is very smooth, very fast, pretty hard hitting action. Maybe not as stiff, right? That spring might not be as stiff as, say, a SOG Zoom, but very good. Now, here's a new discussion I want to have there. A couple things I want to point out. Axis lock, very solid. No blade play in this. But I want to point out that if you do need to adjust the tension on this guy, you can see that it's not something you can just easily do. You have to take this scale off completely, and then underneath you'll find the screw. Now, the other thing that I did with this knife is de-assisted it completely. Now, let me warn you guys, taking apart an assisted Benchmade is not for everybody, okay? And so probably for most of you watching, unless you're very confident about what you're doing and you're very mechanically inclined, don't take this knife apart. It'll give you some heartaches. Preferably, you like an assisted knife and that's why you're buying it. Now, having pointed that out, I de-assisted this knife and the action was incredible. It was as smooth or maybe even smoother than the Freak. It was really, really good. I was able to fairly easily get it to a point where there was no blade play, where it dropped shut. I mean, the action on this knife when it's de-assisted is very, very nice as any Benchmade I've ever seen. Okay, I had some footage of that, but I messed it up, so I'm not going to be able to share it with you. Sorry about that. Just have to take my word for it that this knife de-assisted is very, very pleasant. But take that with the warning that if you try to take this apart and de-assist it yourself, you may regret it, okay? That's all I'm gonna say. Other than that, though, and so, those are the main 2 points I want to make about this. The action here is very fast, very solid, great lockup, and of course, being assisted, a nice quick deployment. And there are roles for assisted knives, guys. I have often said, in certain situations, I think I've told this story before, but I remember I was bringing in a bunch of groceries. I had a box in one hand, I had something else in the other, and I realized the box I was carrying had a rope around it that was still attached. And so I was able to, at that time I happened to be carrying a zero tolerance 0300, but I was able to pull it out, get the knife deployed really easily, and cut the rope that was holding the box. And it wouldn't have been as easy if the knife wasn't assisted. So there are times where having a knife that just takes a little bit of a hint of a suggestion to deploy is worthwhile, okay? Of course, the other side of that is they're kind of fun. Now, let's talk about the handle. This is VersaFlex and GRN handle with full stainless steel liners, plastic backspacer. The VersaFlex is very comfortable, and I've got to say, subject to 2 years worth of testing, right? That's about the only way you know for sure. This VersaFlex has held up really, really well. And it is very comfortable. And of course there is, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking if this ever really started to deteriorate and come apart, I'm very confident that Benchmade would make it right and replace the handles, although you wouldn't want for that to happen. It's better to not need it in the first place, okay? So VersaFlex, you know, although I'm not, you know, the biggest fan of it, it is comfortable and it is grippy, okay? So it achieves what it's trying to do. I will say that, like I mentioned at the beginning, I wish these were G10 scales. That would make this knife just epically good. And I would be thinking, you know, I would be calling this, or the same with this one, guys. Both of these, I would be extremely pleased if they were G10 handles. Beggars can't be choosers. Actually, I can be a chooser. I could have bought a different knife, but it doesn't, let's put it this way. It's not bad enough that I would say don't buy it. It would just be a huge upgrade, but I'm afraid of what Benchmade would charge if they did that. So anyway, stainless steel liners, again, the reinforced plastic backspacer. There is a lock on this guy. We should have talked about this for actuation. This is a lock that I sometimes use, and here's the reason. I can close the knife, turn the lock on, and you can't open the knife. For me, that's worthwhile because of the fact that I have a couple kids in the house, and so making it so that I can close a knife and they can't open it is worthwhile in certain circumstances, okay? So that's something that, although I rarely use, there are times where if I'm gonna set the knife on a countertop or on a table in my home, I will lock it closed just so that if the kids happen to pick it up, they can't get a hold of it. All right, now let's talk about, so of course the places that are just plain plastic are a little slick, and that's by design, okay? They've got to allow for the clip to function and go in and out of pocket, and it does function really, really well. Now I do want to speak to these two little spots here at the front. I've heard people refer to these and talk, you know, are they for styling? Are they, here's what I think these are for. And again, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident that this is the answer. I think when you go to put this in pocket, if you had the VersaFlex all the way to the front of the knife here, it would want to catch and bind on your pocket. By putting these two sort of ramps here, it allows the knife to slide in and out of pocket, or into pocket really, without catching up too badly on the VersaFlex, okay? So other than that, you know, lanyard hole is good. All the screws, and this is something Benchmade typically does right, all the screws are going into metal, so there's no issue with a screw going into plastic or aluminum or anything else like that we see sometimes. The clip is repositionable, left or right side tip up carry. Lanyard hole is certainly big enough. We have no jimping up here, and a little bit of jimping here on the back spine would be really appreciated, although I will say the VersaFlex makes this grippy enough that it's not needed. There's some jimping here, and it's not super sharp, but I mean it's there, and it's a little better than nothing, but not much better. Okay, so construction, ergonomics, all of those things, the construction, now, oh yeah, hold on. I will say this, I do like the stainless steel liners here. It definitely gives me a little more confidence than I have in something like this, where if I squeeze hard, I can get a teeny bit of flex, not bad, but a little. So the stainless steel liners I do appreciate, and I know that makes the knife a little heavier, but it's still a fairly lightweight knife, okay? So not the end of the world. I guess while we're talking about this, I should readdress the construction issue. I mentioned when we talked about the action that if you want to deassist this, taking this apart is a pain in the neck, and that also applies to cleaning. So if you decide to take this apart and clean it up and oil it and everything, you know, it is a pain. If you, especially if you take that pivot screw out and let the assist pop out of its little groove in the blade, getting that assist back in the groove properly is hugely annoying. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about that. Let's go ahead now that we've talked about the construction and the ergonomics to some comparisons. Wait, sorry, one more point, and that is I wish this were just a little bit further up. You know, like take this angle and just move it up an eighth or a quarter of an inch to let me get a little bit closer to the cutting edge. I just prefer that for fine cutting tasks. As it stands, it's not the end of the world. Okay, now let's get to some comparisons. First off is most obviously the Benchmade Freak. The differences here are substantial though, and I will do a full discussion on comparing these two, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Action, of course, is very good. It's assisted versus de-assisted. No stainless steel liners here, which I think makes this a light duty EDC and makes this sort of a heavy duty EDC, okay? What else have we got? Oh yeah, here's another heavy duty EDC. This is a zero tolerance 0350, fairly well known knife. Quite a bit heavier than the Benchmade, okay? But it is, and normally this is assisted, but this is one I kind of brought in because this has been de-assisted by me for the owner of it. And so here's another example of a knife that works well de-assisted. Let's see if I've got anything else. Oh yeah, here's a good knife to compare. This is the Lion Steel Kerr, and the reason I've got this one here is because it's G10 with stainless steel liners, and it's really thick, okay? These two are about the same size. So if you have carried the Kerr, familiar with the Kerr, that'll give you an idea of about how bulky the Benchmade Boost is, and it is a little bulky, okay guys? Let's see, one more Benchmade, and that is of course the Benchmade Contigo. Now if you want a really hard use Benchmade, this is the one I would want to go with. I really like the Contigo. It's obviously quite a bit bigger, and so that's a trade-off as well. Depending on what blade size you like, you may have a preference one way or the other. And I should have a Para 2 around here to compare to somewhere. Oh, there it is. Let's see here. So there it is next to the Para 2. Again, full stainless steel liners, so there's some similarities in construction there. I wish this were G10, as I've said about 5 times in this video already. This is, you know, a great knife, and part of that is because of the G10 with stainless steel liners, and this could be in the same category, I think, if this was G10 instead of the plastic that it is. So, overall, I've got to say I do really like the Benchmade Boost, and I know it's kind of not cool among knife guys to be, you know, praising assisted openers, but this one is well done. It's smooth. They haven't sacrificed tolerances. As I say, I de-assisted this knife, and the action is as good or better than any Benchmade that I've had. In fact, it's as good or better than a lot of knives that I've had with phosphor bronze washers. So very good action on this guy. I know that Benchmade has some quality control issues, and so I can't say that they're finished. Both of these knives have been very good, okay? But here's what I would do. If I was interested in buying this knife, I would call up whatever retailer I was going to use. If you can walk in, do that, right? Get them to take out 3 or 4 and pick the one that's the best. If you can't do that, then call a retailer that you have a good relationship with and say, you know, can you please just check for centering, check for blade play, all the typical things that can be issues, check for an even grind. That seems to be the biggest one, is the Benchmade can really get those grinds wonky. So, you know, you kind of, you know, when you're buying a Benchmade, the way I say it is just do your own quality control, okay, instead of depending on theirs, because it tends to just be not that great. Oh, and by the way, hopefully, you know, in a year's time, I won't be saying this anymore. Hopefully the problem will be fixed and we can move on with life and just say, yes, Benchmade makes awesome knives and still has a great warranty and great customer service. That's where we hope this ends up. But with this knife in particular, the Benchmade Boost, I am definitely a fan. You know, the VersaFlex, I don't hate it. I don't love it. It seems to do what it's intended to do, so I'm not going to be too overly critical of it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.